Hello, National University CSET Prep students and National University Academy students. Those of you studying for world history, U.S. history with regard to World War II. I'm going to continue with my lecture on the origins of World War II, and now we're going to turn to the Nazi-Soviet Pact. And I'm going to begin by reading to you from The Second World War in the West by Charles Messenger. I recommend it. Now, I'm going to focus in on the Non-Aggression Pact. So we just discussed Hitler gaining Sudetenland, Neville Chamberlain's appeasement not working, Hitler on the march, France and Great Britain realizing that these concessions to Hitler are not going to dissuade him from trying to gain more land and a larger empire under Nazi aggression. So here's where we come to a fateful moment in 1939. The Western democracies did have one ray of hope. In April 1939, the Soviet Union proposed a 10-year alliance with Britain and France. London and Paris welcomed this, seeing not only as a more effective means of protecting Poland, but also as a way to present Hitler with the great threat of the simultaneous war on both fronts, with Germany, which Germany had traditionally tried to avoid. Negotiations continued throughout much of the summer, but it was Poland itself which had the sticking point. Anathema towards their eastern neighbor meant that the Poles would never allow Russian forces into their territory. Hitler, realizing what he had in mind, also began to make secret overtures to Moscow. On the 23rd of August, Germany and the Soviet Union signed the Non-Aggression Pact, taking Britain and France as well as much of the rest of the world by surprise. Now remember, at this time, Soviet Union just had finished talking to France and Germany about having a long-standing agreement, a 10-year alliance with them. So what's happening is the Soviet Union is playing with the chessboard a little bit and making agreements with both of the powers, hedging their bet, so to speak. If the Allied forces are able to get it together and they take control of these regions, the Soviet Union wants a peace. If Hitler gains control, Stalin still wants to have some agreement with him. All in all, though, Stalin will not accept Hitler coming into Russia. So this Non-Aggression Pact, of course, gives Hitler time to plan his attack on Russia, saying, oh, we won't attack you. We're buddies, right? Meanwhile, that gives him more time to plan. Remember, the Japanese were going to peace talks, or about to go to peace talks, the day of Pearl Harbor. So countries do this all the time. Let's sit down and talk. And meanwhile, it'll give us an opportunity to get our forces together. All right, so continuing. What had caused the volte-face was that Hitler was proposed to give Stalin the eastern part of Poland after the country had been overrun, and would also allow him to a free hand in the Baltic states. Throughout August, the German armies had been steadily deploying close to the Polish border under the pretext of maneuvers. Hitler gave orders that the invasion was to begin in the early hours of 26th of August. That afternoon, the troops began to move forward to jump off positions. So the Non-Aggression Pact has been made. Non-Aggression Treaty signed by Germany and Soviet Union was in 1939, in which the two nations publicly agreed to avoid armed conflict with one another. Secretly, another agreement was negotiated in which Germany and the Soviet Union agreed to divide the countries of the northeastern into spheres of influence. North and Eastern Europe into spheres of influence. Poland was to be divided between the two. World War II began with Germany's invasion of Western Poland, followed by the Soviet Union's invasion of the East. Soon, states in the Baltic region fell under the control of the Soviet Union as Hitler systematically gained control of nations throughout Eastern Europe. Germany violated the pact by invading the Soviet Union in June of 1941. And quickly took control of the Soviet spheres of influence in the Baltic countries and Eastern Europe. So again, Hitler makes the agreement, then goes against it. Something that's not unusual for many nations, our nation included. Remember, we can't forget our many treaties with the Native Americans, which were just essentially us buying time to figure out where we're going to put our expanding population. So all the treaties, whether it was Fort Laramie on down, were eventually violated, even though they were supposed to be in perpetuity, forever and ever, amen. Those were violated. And of course Hitler, no different here, but his aggression, possibly with the hopes of world control or world power, were obvious. So Germany violates the pact by invading the Soviet Union. Ultimately, the Soviet Union was able to push back the Germans, and its goal of extending Soviet influence across Eastern Europe was realized after World War II with the creation of the satellite nations. So this is going to bring us up to the Mukden incident, the Manchurian, also known as the Manchurian incident. It's occurred in Manchuria on September 1931. This goes back again before the war, but this is going to focus on the Japanese for a moment. When Japanese troops blew up part of the South Manchurian Railway, Japan accused China of sabotage and used the incident as a pretext to annex Manchuria. By 1932, Japanese troops gained control of Manchuria and established a puppet state in the region. The League of Nations condemned Japan's actions. Japan responded by withdrawing from the League. Following its withdrawal from the League, Japan began to aggressively pursue a militaristic and expansionist policy, and in 1937 launched a full-scale invasion of China. Yes, I know I was a little anachronistic there. I went all the way through to 1941 and then backed up to 1937. Excuse that, but I wanted to get in that little bit about China. So let's go continue where the Japanese invasion of China. Let's continue with the Japanese invasion of China in 1937. Japan launched a full-scale invasion of China in the hopes of gaining control of China's extensive natural resources. Japan quickly gained control of the northern and eastern China. The international community condemned the attack, but was ill-prepared to stop it. Japan faced little opposition in China until well after the start of World War II. With the U.S. entry of the war after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, Japan was forced to redirect its efforts to protect the empire throughout the Pacific. So here we can see Japan, as Germany's rolling forward, the Axis powers are rolling forward, taking land, trying to find places where to get resources, setting their roads and railway down to really start to allow the Axis powers to not only become a more militaristic power, effective militaristic power, but to really get ready for domination. And if the sleeping giant, United States, doesn't get involved here soon, 1941, we're going to have major issues in Europe with Japan taking over China and with the Nazis taking over much of Europe. Quickly, the rape of Nanking. Following Japan's invasion of mainland China in 1937, China experienced mass death and suffering. Japan began aerial bombing of major Chinese cities, especially Shanghai, where people died by the thousands. Japanese troops, fueled by racial superiority, extreme nationalism, and the fervor of war, unleashed an attack on Nanking. Over 2 months, Japanese soldiers murdered thousands of unarmed soldiers, civilians, raped an estimated 7,000 women, and burned a third of the homes. An estimated 400,000 were killed either by Japanese bayonets or from being machine gunned into open pits. This was a genocidal attack in Nanking. The only thing close to that right now, if you look at the Congo or the Sudan, where people are being raped and murdered systematically, and of course the Nazis did it with the Holocaust, the systematic extermination of, or attempted systematic extermination of all Jews. So without throwing too much at you at once, Nanking, Chinese invasion of China, or Japanese invasion of China, Hitler moving into more parts of Europe, and the Non-Aggression Pact covered there. I will get back to you shortly with more about World War II. Stay tuned.